Good evening, everyone. My name is Teresa Watkins. I am a landscape designer and garden author and host of Better Lawns and Gardens. It's a syndicated garden podcast. I am so glad you're here today. And we have a wonderful night planned out for you with 4 of our wonderful authors. And so I'm going to introduce our GardenComm representatives, National Garden Bureau representative, Diane Blazik, and Maria Zampini.
Okay, so welcome to our GardenComm Authors Talk Gardening Book Party. And we're glad you're joining us tonight. It's going to be great gardening fun. And my name is Maria Zampini, and I'm the president of Garden Communicators International, commonly referred to as GardenComm. And GardenComm is proud to partner with the National Garden Bureau to introduce you to some amazing garden writers who belong to both of our organizations. And GardenComm members are professionals in the green industry world. They engage with both home gardeners and or those in the green industry trade through a variety of mediums, such as writers, photographers, speakers, radio and podcast hosts, and so much more. So now I'd like to turn it over to our co-sponsor, Diane Blazik.
Thank you, Maria, and welcome everyone. So yes, I'm Diane Blazik. I'm the executive director for National Garden Bureau and All America Selections, so wear 2 hats. But we're very excited about tonight. This is the 4th Authors Talk Gardening Book Party. So we just keep improving, hopefully, and spreading the word. Our organization, National Garden Bureau, is 103 years old. So we have been around a little while. And what we do is we educate and inspire people to do more gardening, which is why we're here tonight. And we think after you meet these authors, hear about their books, you're going to be very, very inspired.
Wonderful. So now, thank you very much, Diane. Thank you, Maria. We're going to meet our 4 celebrity authors. And the first one is Susan Betz. And Susan, good evening. Thank you for joining us. Please tell us about yourself.
Well, thank you for having me. As you said, my name is Susan Betz. I'm a honorary master gardener, author, and I'm a member. I'm a life member of the Herb Society of America, and I've been growing and using herbs for over 35 years to educate people about gardening in the natural world. And for me, herbs it isn't just about gardening, it's a way of life. I love these plants and I'm very happy to be here to share them.
Thank you so much, Susan. We're so happy to have you with us. Our next author is Shelley Cramm. Good evening, Shelley. Tell us about yourself.
Good evening. I'm Shelley Cramm, author and gardener, wife and mother of 5. I live in Irving, Texas. That's just outside Dallas. So if you've ever flown through DFW Airport, you've been just a stone's throw away from my suburban home garden. And there I love to grow and trial all sorts of plants related to the Bible and write about them on my website, www.gardenandelight.com. I've written lots of blogs on growing faith while growing your garden, and I've just released my second book. Here it is. My Father is the Gardener, Devotions in Botany and Gardening of the Bible. And this all relates the plants and the ancient words of Scripture to our present, everyday, modern gardening lives. And actually, I think gardening relates to many more things than just gardening, but more things in our lives as well, as we feel pruned or we feel like we're ready to be watered. All these kinds of metaphors are lots of fun. So I love writing about that. I've been a member of GardenComm for 13 years, and I joined National Garden Bureau about 6 years ago when they began to help home gardeners connect to garden authors. So I'm glad to be here with you all tonight.
Wonderful, Shelley. Thank you so much. Our next author is Charlotte Wiggins. Good evening, Charlotte. Tell us about yourself.
Hi, Teresa. Hi, everybody. I live in the USA. I'm in Missouri, mid-Missouri. I call it the belly button of the state. I'm a master gardener and master beekeeper, and I've been gardening on this 1-acre barren limestone hillside for over 40 years, where my neighbors said nothing would grow. I became a pollinator advocate in 2010 when I added honeybees to the property. And I like to tell people, if you want to help bees, native bees, honeybees, pollinators, just keep planting more flowers. That's the easiest thing that you can do. It's not hard to do if you learn by joining groups like Master Gardeners and Master Naturalists, Master Beekeepers. But more importantly, if I can do it on this hillside, I can assure you, you'll be able to do it if you have better growing conditions than I do.
That's great, Charlotte. Thank you so much. And now our last author is across the pond, Michael Perry. Good evening. Thank you for joining us.
Hey, good to see you all. My name is Michael Perry, also known as Mr. Plant Geek. You might know me online under this name. I was gardening with my grandparents from a really, really young age. Actually, interestingly, I had a herb nursery when I was just a teenager, and I was selling plants through mail order and basically selling plants at local markets as well. I then joined Thompson & Morgan, which is the largest mail order plant company in the UK, and I introduced about 500 brand new plants. Crazy plants like the egg and chips plant, which is eggplant and potatoes on the bottom, but also a lot of everyday plants, kind of remarketing as well. And of course, my love of new, different and unusual plants all came together in Hortus Curious, which is the book that I'm going to talk to you guys about tonight, which is botany simplified and plants in a fun way as well, and accessible to everyone, even people that think they hate plants as well. So great to be here.
Thank you so much, Michael. And we are going to be giving away each one of the author's books. So you want to make sure you stay through right to the end for that. So we're going to ask 4 questions and get to know these authors a little bit more about and learn about their personalities. So the very first question, Michael, is to you. And what compelled or inspired you to write your book, Hortus Curious?
First of all, it was my love of unique plants and strange plants, and also wanting to communicate how important plants are in our day-to-day existences, but knowing that I had to get people's attention in really unique ways. So, of course, you've got plants in here that can dance, they can move themselves, they smell of old socks. You know, you've got so many unique plants in there that kind of really get the headlines, and that puts them in front of everyone. So this book, like I said, is accessible to everybody. So anyone can pick up one of these books, read a chapter, which you can easily read in about 10 minutes, and come away with a real curiosity about those plants. So it was really trying to communicate plants to a wider audience. And also, I'm not a botanist at all. So I wanted to learn the botany in order to then translate it in really easy to digest ways. So I talk about the orchid that catfishes because it, you know, attracts a certain sort of insect. So loads of different anecdotes in there. And I really, really enjoyed writing it too.
Wow, that sounds fascinating. Old socks, huh? All right. So Shelley, what inspired you or compelled you to write your book?
Oh, thank you, Teresa. Well, originally it was another little book that got me started on this whole writing career, really. And it was called Secrets of the Vine. And in that, the author, Dr. Bruce Wilkinson, he wanted to look at and understand better the passages in John 15 that talk about grapevines. And so he went to a vine dresser. He stayed at a vineyard and he followed the vine dresser around as he cared for the vines. And that really just illuminated for him everything that Jesus was trying to say about being pruned at the time. And I just found that fascinating, that the details of the plant care were so accurate in this ancient scripture. I mean, I expected it to be high and holy, but I did not expect it to be dirty. I did not expect it to be real down to the ground. And so I just thought, okay, if this is true about grapevines, what other plants are in here? What else is in here? Because at the time I was feeling very pruned. I had left my job in architecture to stay home and have our care for our children, which was the most wonderful and the hardest job I've ever done. And I just needed direction. So it just got me started and digging in and learning more and more. And soon, after many, many years, a book arrived.
Wonderful. Thank you, Shelley. And Charlotte, what inspired you to write your book?
Well, this is the book I would have liked to have had when I started beekeeping. There are some wonderful university press books out there that go into the details of biology and because you become an amateur biologist as a beekeeper, but I'm a list maker. And I've read a lot of these books. And when I finished reading those, I said to myself, now what? I mean, where do I start? And so my book is a combination of beginning beekeeping guide. It has some of the basic biology in it, but it's more focused on practical application, right? There are 14 decisions you have to make on where you're going to place your hives on a piece of property. So there's a checklist there. It has the things you need to consider when you're deciding to do. And it's designed to also be providing beekeepers with scientifically based best management practices. There's a lot of information out there. Not all of it is relevant or correct. So this has a foundation in the Great Plains Master Beekeeping Program, providing beekeepers a solid foundation that they can build on.
Wow, that's really great. Thank you so much, Charlotte. And Susan, what inspired or compelled you to write your book?
Well, I've enjoyed herbs so much, their fragrance, their care, taking care of them, and all the many uses I've had with them over the years. I've gotten so much enjoyment from them that I wanted to share that pleasure with others. And people have been growing and using herbs for thousands of years, and they're more than purely decorative plants. Herbs give more for the time and space devoted to them than any other category of growing plants. And they're one of Mother Nature's oldest garden gifts. And they were probably the first plants welcomed indoors, not for aesthetic reasons, but for out of necessity. And at the end of the day, we all use herbs in one form or another. And whether growing in a plot or a garden or a pot, they have something of value to offer everybody, to offer the mind, body, and spirit of every type of person. And over time, the various uses of plants change, and as do our needs, and they change from one generation to the next. And I wanted a new generation of gardeners to learn about these wonderful plants. And our gardening space has started to get a little bit more limited, and people live in urban environments. And I wanted those people to have the opportunity to enjoy the flavor, fragrance, and fun of these plants. And so I just wanted to share that love, and that's why I wrote this book, Herbal Houseplants.
Wonderful. And we're so glad you did. All right, that's great. So now the second question is, what zone or region do you garden in? And what are you planning to do next in your garden? So let's start with Shelley this time. Shelley, what region and zone do you garden in? And what are you planning to do next in your garden?
So I'm a zone 8 gardener here in Texas, but we've just had 2 zone 7 winters. That was right after a zone 6 plunge in 2021 with the Snowmageddon. So we're kind of all over the place, changing it up. And we also have a lot of hot summers. So, but I don't mean to grumble about the weather, but just to say that we have a lot of conditions to juggle, which I think most of us are finding these days. But what I'm working on next is trees, planting trees. Fall is the best time to plant trees, especially here when you have a hot summer. Let those roots get established before the heat comes on in the following year. So I've just planted my a little cultivar of crab apple called the lollipop crab apple, which I'm so excited about. And then I'm also going to plant an apricot tree. These are 2 fruit trees that I talk about in chapter 11 of my book, which have to do with, is it really an apple or is it an apricot that's mentioned in scripture? So I'm just going to have fun growing those. Also, we have a great winter vegetable season. Actually, we're really ramping up. This is the beginning of our gardening. I think fall and winter gardening is much more enjoyable down here. So I'm putting out seeds for mustard greens and all kinds of winter vegetables, winter herbs, cool season herbs, and then also getting those bulbs ready for the spring. So there's a lot going on. I'm behind already, actually.
Thank you so much, Shelley. All right. And so Charlotte, what are you doing in your garden? And what region and zone do you garden in with your bees?
So I'm in hardiness zone 5B, 6A. I tend to default to the colder because those zones, right, are an average over 13 years. And I'm in heat zone 8. So we have seen significant increase in the heat that we're having to deal with through summer and fall. We have longer springs and falls and shorter summers and winters. So I'm continuing to make my garden sustainable, right? I'm building terraces to make it level so I can safely move from hive to hive and from flower garden to flower garden. I'm planting more natives. I'm in love with false indigo trees and beauty berries. Those will be going in next spring. And I'm also harvesting the rainwater from my house gutters to make them help water my garden naturally.
Wonderful. Okay. Susan, what region do you live in? What garden zone? And what are you doing next in your garden?
I live in South Central Michigan, down by the Indiana-Ohio border, and so it's Zone 5A and Zone 5B. But it just as Shelley and Charlotte just said, things have been changing over the past few years in my garden with the weather. So I want to make my garden more climate resilient. I want to kind of move with the seasons. And so I have a lot of natives, but next year I'm planting, I love dianthus. So I'm going to be planting a lot more of those. Not that I don't have enough right now. And I'm going to make a big blue stem hedge. It's a grass to create a bit of privacy around an area that needs a little covering up. But it's a native grass that grows out in my prairie. And so I'm going to move that along a fence.
Oh, wow. That sounds excellent. All right. So across the water in England, but Michael, tonight you're in Holland, right? But what garden zones do you grow in Britain? And what are you doing in your garden next?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I did the quickest Google just now, and I think UK is equivalent to 7 to 10 of your zones over there. And I have to say, my book is so many unusual plants that I don't grow any of these because they're far too exotic. This is more like my bucket list of plants. But my garden at home is completely different. So it's very much almost like a kind of, I would say, like a prairie planting, especially in my front garden with lots of grasses, kind of pollinator-rich perennials as well, and kind of very wild. And my neighbors always kind of think my garden's a bit of a jungle and that it needs a bit of tending. But actually, compared to their gardens, it's the one that is the best for the wildlife and gives the most flowers and the most fragrance as well. So I'm not afraid to overplant my borders, have it really full. And that means you get less weeds. But of course, what are weeds? It's just a matter of opinion at the end of the day. So yeah, I like to have lots of plants, lots of color, and just nature all around me, really. Yeah.
Oh, that sounds great. That's wonderful. All right. And so we are going to have now our very first raffle, and it's going to be for Charlotte's book, A Beekeeper's Diary, The Self-Guide to Meeting Bees. And Diane, who's the lucky winner?
I get to pull a name out of the hat and read it off. And the lucky winner is Barbara Soper, Soper. So Barbara, do me a favor down in chat, click on just me. I don't think you want everybody knowing your address. But if you can send me a private chat with your mailing shipping address, and then I will give that to Charlotte and she can send the book out to you. Congratulations.
Wonderful. Congratulations. That's wonderful. All right. So that is a great book to have. And so now we're going to go to our third question, and we are going to start it off with Charlotte. And so Charlotte, who is the intended audience for your book?
Well, it's designed for beginning beekeepers, people who want to start keeping bees, native bees as well as honeybees, and to give them a scientifically based best management practice foundation for beekeeping. It doesn't mean you can't go out and catch a swarm and then hope you can find somebody who's going to walk you through how to take care of that. But beekeeping is expensive. It's an expensive hobby. $1,000 in a used freezer is what I tell my students. So invest first in your education, right? Take classes, get this book, because this book supports a lot of beginning beekeeping classes, and get a solid understanding of what you're dealing with. It's also, by the way, fun to read. I enjoy people who read it, even if they're not going to become beekeepers, and tell me that they really enjoyed the humor and enjoyed the content.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you, Charlotte. And let's go to Susan. And Susan, who is your intended audience for your book?
Well, I think anybody that's interested in herbs would find it fun and useful to read. But I was thinking of people with limited outdoor gardening options, that need to garden in containers, and then and people who want to grow their own herbs indoors. And why? Because times change, and as I said earlier, some people have limited space, and they want to be able to grow herbs. And due to the popularity of indoor gardening, the wonderful thing is, as I said, I've been growing herbs for 35, 40 years, and times change. And not only are there new techniques, tools, efficient grow lights, and organic soil mixtures, people also have the added benefit of a wide variety of herbs specifically bred for small spaces and containers to choose from. So it's a lot easier to cultivate herbs indoors. And they're not only useful plants, but herbs personalize the people-plant connection. And I think that good relationships are what give our life meaning, and herbs are good at making friends for themselves.
I love that. Thank you so much, Susan. And so let's go to Michael. Michael, who is your intended audience for your Hortus Curious?
Well, I know it sounds it might seem a bit lazy, but it was really intended for everyone, because I think there are so many books out there, especially books about strange plants, that are really caught up in the botanical descriptions, the Latin names. They kind of take themselves almost a little bit too seriously, and I think sometimes the botanists they aren't able to explain things in usual terms. And of course, like I said, I'm not a botanist at all, so I wanted to kind of pull apart how I understood the plant and its workings, and then explain that to my audience in a really fun and sometimes even irrelevant way. Kind of, it's just really day to day to really help people understand. So I think this would be really of interest to experienced gardeners, to botanists, because they would appreciate it, because there is serious botany in there, just explained in a real straightforward manner, but also people that have been put off by botany before, but also younger people, maybe not kids, but certainly teenagers, that sort of age. And I remember when I released the egg and chips plant all those years ago, it was teenagers that were going crazy for this plant on Twitter because it was so strange and quirky. And so we need to access people in different demographics in different ways. And that is why I tried to make this a really fun language that this book is written in. So it appeals to everyone.
Wonderful. I think so. And so now, Shelley, my father is the gardener. Who is your intended audience for your book?
Oh, thank you, Teresa. Well, like Michael was saying, my book is really intended for anyone who just has a craze for gardening and just loves to learn more and more and wants to connect more to the history of gardening, because we all know it starts in the Garden of Eden, right? Or at least we have that fantasy of making our gardens and that beautiful, lovely, romantic idea. And so just to be able to really dig in and see more of how the scriptures and more of how that history can relate to us now. It's also a picture book. So if anyone loves just looking at pretty pictures or needs a soothing read before they go to sleep or something like that, I really enjoyed reading stories to my children all those years. So I have to say, I want an adult picture book, right? So we just brought a real crossroads of details together, both the botanical illustrations from history, and then we have a new artist that also did lots of the pictures, and we photographed from herbarium specimens. So it's just a real crossroads of details coming together in a lovely way. So anyone ready to be blessed in that way, this is for you.
Thank you, Shelley. That's wonderful. So the fourth question, please, and we're going to start with Susan. Tell us about the one interesting thing you learned while writing your book.
Well, I think it's something that I came to realize, that it's important for people to realize in a natural sense that there's really no such thing as a house plant. And I was thinking of a book Helen Van Pelt Wilson wrote years ago, and she said back in the 30s that no plant would claim the house, an indoor house environment, as its natural habitat. And so it's really important for people to realize a plant growing in a container is dependent upon the gardener for its every need. And not all herbs are suitable for indoor, cultivation and growing because of, their size, unruly habitat. So I think we need to honor the plants that we grow and use. And, as I said, it's a reciprocal relationship to take care of them. So it's wise to think about the plant that you're bringing into your house. Are you a passive or an interactive gardener? And how much time do you want to spend?
Good points, Susan. Michael, so what is the most interesting thing you learned while writing your book?
Well, I guess I learned a lot of botany along the way, and obviously then translating that into my own language. But I also learned, which kind of shocked me a bit, that there are so many plants out there, and sometimes we move through the world and we assume that everything is understood, everything is discovered, but there are still plants being discovered. But more importantly, there are still plants that we don't know why they do what they do. So in the book, there's the burning bush, the dictamnus. Like nobody knows why this can spontaneously combust. The obedient plant, the Physostegia, nobody knows why you can move the little petals with the hinge. So it was all of those unusual facts that very often are kind of hearsay, and there was no real evidence for why they do what they do. So kind of it was quite difficult because like the research, there was none actually there. So sometimes it was like, well, oh, actually, we believe that it does this. So that was a big learning curve. But of course, there's so many different facts and figures that I learned for a lot of the plants, like Venus flytraps being able to count, for example, coffee plants naturally flowering themselves to death as well, miracle berries, Aldrovanda, which is the underwater Venus flytrap as well. So it was a big learning curve, kind of how to put it together, and also learning about the plants that I love as well.
Oh, wow, exciting. All right. And so Shelley, what was the interesting thing you learned about your book while writing it?
Okay, well, I just learned that there's actually a burning bush, Michael. Now I'm gonna have to get your book and learn more about that. Every faith gardener needs a burning bush. So I would say, actually, also, like he was saying, botany was the real learning curve for me writing this too. I worked with the Botanical Research Institute of Texas. They're my publisher, Brit Press. And so I didn't really even know what an herbarium was. I didn't know those existed, and don't feel bad if you don't know either. That's a big, big building with great air conditioning. So if you have a hot summer, it's a great place to hang out. But that's where botanists press plants and store them for that historical record, so they know what grew where and when. And they are really fascinating buildings because, I mean, we pulled specimens from the 1800s, even from the Holy Land. So it's really fun to dig into those, and that there's just a whole culture that goes along with those institutions. I didn't know any about that. Now I did know about botanical names and plant classification, but it was just great to kind of round out my gardening knowledge with a botanical approach.
Great, wonderful. Thank you, Charlotte. What did you learn the interesting thing while writing your book?
Well, I didn't realize that my approach was revolutionizing the way beekeeping is taught. I can't tell you the number of times I've had beekeepers say to me, especially when they're starting the class, and I start by teaching them about plants and how to grow basic plants. Well, I'm a beekeeper. Why do I need to know about gardening? And when I lecture to the gardeners, they're often saying to me, I don't want to keep bees. I don't need to know about bees. I said, well, what about pollinators? So if you realize that bees within a 2-mile radius of their hive are going to be accessing those plants for their food, right? Flower, a nectar for flight fuel, carbs, pollen to make the baby food. It is intuitive to me that both beekeepers and gardeners should know about each other. And that's what I did in my book. I start out with that, and then I go into beekeeping.
Excellent, Charlotte. Thank you so much. So our fifth question is, when you give a talk, what is your most common question and how do you answer it? And we'll start off with Michael.
Well, first of all, if it's a gardening talk, obviously they're going to talk to you about gardening stuff anyway. But the worst thing can be when you're going to a party, like a normal social event, and someone's like always asking about why their plant died. And this is so subjective. Like, why is my house plant yellow? Well, it could be this, could be this, could be this. So that's a really annoying question. But the other one I often get asked is, what is my favorite plant? And I'm always ready to reply with iris. And I think it's iris because when I was really young, I remember painting an iris on a stone for my grandma to give her as a gift. And also, I think iris is such an amazing family because you've got every color of the rainbow. You've got an iris for every continent. You've got an iris that flowers every season, every month of the year as well. So that is what I usually get asked, and that is my usual answer.
Right. I love irises. All right. And so, Shelley, what is your most common question when you give a talk, and how do you answer it?
Well, usually when I give a talk, I get to talk about my book in person. The most common thing I hear at the end of the talk, people will come up to me and just say, this reminds me of my mother. I need to get this book from my mother, or this reminds me of my grandmother. She loved to garden. She's a very faithful woman. And so someone will say, my daughter just picked up gardening. So I want her to have this book too. So I just love that response because I love to see people just love fills up their face, their heart, and they just, as they think of someone they love who loves gardening, it just kind of takes them over. It's very sweet. So I just really think gardening is about love. It's about growing love, and that's God's love at work. That's just how He works, and so that's one of my favorite things.
Thank you, Shelley. And Charlotte, when you give talks, I know they're really interesting. And what is your most common question, and how do you answer it?
I bet you can guess. It's how often do I get stung? And I've been doing this for 15 years now, and I actually get stung less now without wearing gloves, working dozens of hives, compared to when I first started and had gloves up to my elbows and only had 2 hives. The reality is, as a beekeeper, you learn to read your bees. Bees are defensive. They're not out there trying to attack anybody. They're protecting their colony. So if you take the lid off, the cover off of your hive, and all the bees are looking at you, just very gently put the cover back on and go back and visit them later. If, however, they're just doing their own business, they're moving about, they're not paying any attention to what you're doing, then that's a sign that you can get in and work with your bees. Get to know your bees and they'll get to know you. They will recognize you as the beekeeper, and you can work around them without protective equipment. But if somebody comes in, they have to be suited up to be protected.
Wow. Interesting. All right. And Susan, what is your most common question when you give talks, and how do you answer it?
Well, one of the most common questions I get is people who brought their rosemary plant in for the winter. They want to know why it dies in March. It seems to do fine, and then by March it's kind of tired and dies. And I talk to them, just as Charlotte said, she reads her bees, you need to know how to read your plants and move them. I mean, seasonality and seasons don't just take place outside. It also takes place in your house. And so you need to be very aware of that indoor environment and move your plants around and look at them and see if they need water, or to be careful when watering them. But growing herbs, people a lot of times say they appeal to your 5 senses. But if you grow them long enough, you also develop a 6th sense. And so you can, just by looking at a plant, walking back and forth around it during the day, throughout the week, you know when it needs something. So you need to learn to read your plants.
Good tip. Good tip. Thank you so much. And so now we're going to have our second raffle, and it's going to be for Shelley Cramm's book, My Father is the Gardener, and my book, A Gardener's Compendium, Volume 3, Gardening with the Senses. And I don't have one to hang up and show up, but Shelley, that's wonderful. Diane, can you pull 2 names?
I certainly can. Let's see here. This is very exciting. For Shelley's book, the winner is Ellen Miller. So congratulations, Ellen. And the next one we're drawing for Teresa's book is Julie Moon. So Ellen and Julie, I will private message you, and then you can send me your shipping address back. So congratulations.
Thank you so much, Diane. Congratulations. That's wonderful. And so we have a few more questions to go. We're going to get a chance to meet and have a private room with the authors. So you want to stay tuned for that. And so our next question is, What plant or product do you recommend every gardener should try? And we'll start with Shelley this time.
Okay, this is a good one for this audience, especially. This is hyssop from the Bible. Cleanse me with hyssop and I will be clean. Wash me and I'll be white as snow. And the reason I think that King David wrote it that way, let's see if I can show you this. There are little itty bitty white flowers that come up on this plant as it flowers all summer long. And I think they kind of look like snowflakes. So I can see why that poetic line was written. But hyssop is from the mint family. It's an herb. So connecting to Susan's book, it has an oregano scent. It's in the oregano genus, but it does have its own little mystery to itself. It's a special variety from that's named Syrian oregano, is another common name. And I just love this plant because for me anyway, it's a perennial, so probably perennial to at least zone 7. And so it's pretty and green, soft leaves all summer. Oh, I'll keep holding it up. But then it also gets taller and as it flowers, and it's just filled with bees all summer long. So Charlotte, you'll love this one too. And I love it. Just brings a lot of activity, a lot of fun and vibrancy to the garden, and of course lots of pollinators, lots of bees in there. So if you're growing cucumbers or other things during the summer, you're keeping bees around. But I also love the little hint that when God told the Israelites that he was bringing them to a land filled with milk and honey, well, this plant is very prolific in the Holy Land. And so he was probably right. It was probably filled with a lot of honey because there were a lot of bees on the hyssop. So there you go.
Thank you so much, Shelley. Charlotte, what plant or product do you recommend every gardener should try?
Well, if you're starting, and Susan, I think you'll be happy to hear this, I think you start with herbs. I'm actually having an apple mint tea, homemade tea tonight while I'm enjoying this session. One of the 6 plant families that naturally feed bees and other pollinators. But more importantly, it gives the gardener who's starting an incentive because you can use a lot of herbs in cooking. Ever had spearmint water? It's delicious in a very hot summer, or rosemary in soups. So once you get hooked on 1 or 2 herbs, it's very easy to then continue planting, using it in your garden. And by doing that, you're also feeding native bees and pollinators in the process. Now, in terms of a product, march right down to your extension office and get yourself a soil test. You need to know what plants need to grow or can grow, what soil conditions you have. Not all plants grow in all soils, and not all soils are alike. And that's probably the biggest mistake I see gardeners making. Find out, know your soil.
Very smart, Charlotte. Thank you. Susan, what is your plant that you recommend every gardener should try, and what product do you recommend?
Well, I just want to say I agree with Charlotte. Herb gardeners have always gardened for bees. It's just been part of their system, like old-fashioned bee scaps. I mean, when you look at old woodcuts and portraits and stuff of herb gardens, you will always see, not most of the time, you'll see a little woven bee scap. And so bees really do love herbs. But one of the plants I would like to share with people that I love, it's an oregano too, and it's a cultivar, and it's called Hilltop. And it is a wonderful fragrant herb. The bees like it. It's a beautiful mix of marjoram and oregano. So if you have limited space and you can only grow one or the other, you could grow this and you would be just delighted with it. It's just a wonderful fragrant herb, and I just love it. The other thing I would recommend as far as a product is when growing herbs indoors, you need a long handle water can with a long spout so you don't get water on your leaves. So those are a couple of the things that I would recommend. And thanks
Thank you so much, Susan. You're welcome. All right. And Michael, what is the plant that you recommend, and what product do you think every gardener should have?
Yeah, well, I'm not going to recommend a herb, even though I love herbs and I have since I was young. But I feel compelled to recommend something from my book, which is the dancing plant. And this is actually a plant that actually moves itself. And I know we've got the sensitive plant, the Mimosa pudica. This is actually very different. This is Desmodium gyrans, and this actually moves around in relation to vibrations and light as well. And this is another one, they're not quite sure why it does what it does. It might actually be to dodge away from predators as well. So really, really fascinating plant. And I actually discovered a few years ago that you can buy seed and you can grow it quite easily from seed on the windowsill. So I think this is the next sensitive plant. It's a really, really great plant for kids as well. And you can kind of sing to it and it dances for you. So really, really fun. In terms of product, it's actually something that I found at the Garden Center Expo, which was on at the same time as the GardenComm event in Minneapolis this summer. And it's actually from a Canadian company called Mossify, and it's a bendy moss pole. And it's really, really interesting because you can use it with your Monstera indoors, and you can actually bend the pole to actually create lots of different shapes. So you could use it with devil's ivy as well, epimena, and actually have that really unique look as well. And they're all organic too. Really, really great company with lots of interesting products. That is Mossify. So look those up if you wish to.
Certainly will. I think that's interesting. So that's wonderful. So our next question is, what is one garden takeaway folks will learn from your book? And we're going to start with you, Charlotte.
Well, I suppose people are going to expect it to be bee related, and I do have plant lists for native plants to plant, but I start on the other end of the plant, and that is keeping the soil healthy, because that's the hardest thing to do if you're gardening. You want to play with all the plants, you want to buy the plants that are blooming. You forget that it all starts in the root and in the soil. So focus on keeping your soil healthy, right? Compost, mulch, water, and then the roots will take care of the plant. The plant will then take care of the bees. The bees will take care of us and give us healthy food. So focus on that end of the plant.
Excellent. All right. And Susan, what is one garden takeaway folks will learn from your book?
Well, the best way to learn about herbs is by growing and using them, rediscovering the old uses and finding new uses, because there's always, as Michael said, there's always something new to discover, because we each come to plants from a different perspective, and we need all those different perspectives and imagination when we look at our plants. And so I think that that's really important. And if you take care of your plants will take care of you.
Excellent. Wonderful. All right. And then Shelley, I'm sorry, I'm going to go to Michael next. Michael, what is the one gardening takeaway that everyone will learn from your book?
I think really is quite top line, and it is that plants are really quite intelligent. And in some instances, plants are probably more intelligent than we are, because you've got plants that are like a Venus flytrap or any of the insect-eating plants that they capture prey without even moving. Plants do everything they need to do without moving, apart from a few that can move. But, you've got plants that have specific relationships with certain pollinators. They deceive pollinators as well. They're really, really intelligent. And also, of course, we find lots of different uses in plants as well. So we don't only eat them, but we also drink them, we wear them. We've been inspired by them to build different materials and buildings, and kind of, for example, the Victoria water lily, kind of how this floats, the pockets of air, all of this inspiration coming back from plants. So they really are super intelligent, super fascinating. And it was such a pleasure to put the book together.
Oh, excellent. Thank you so much. And Shelley, what is the one garden takeaway folks are going to learn from your book?
It's hard to think of just one, but I think if I have to narrow it, I would say to take away that God is in the details. And that is something we actually used to say in architecture. Mies van der Rohe originally said that, but I would just, when you study and you start to see, just like I was showing you, the little snowflake flower looking thing, and that becomes part of God's word. These details are so wonderful how they come together. And it's like a little hidden world for gardeners, for not only, botanists that know the plants, but taking care of the plants is what really gives you that insight. And it's just wonderful. And so we tried to mirror that just in the way we brought the details together in the book with the different drawings, and the book designer just did a marvelous job. So anyway, I hope those small, subtle details are just really soothing and a blessing, and just bring you a lot of rest and inspiration.
Thank you, Shelley. That's wonderful. All right. And so now our next question is one that I've been looking forward to all night. And it's, I want you to tell us about your biggest garden goof and what you learned from it. So Susan, tell us about your biggest garden goof.
An overabundance of botanical curiosity. I often get very excited about a plant and its herbal uses before I think about where I'm going to put it at when I bring it home. And I think that we really need to think about that, but that can be fun. And I planted a Washington hawthorn, and I remember when I planted it, they were little whips. And I was so excited with the little whips, and I tell people that's going to be a hedge, and they'd look at me and kind of laugh. And now 20 years later, it's a hedge. I do not know what to do with it. It's so hard to maintain that I didn't think about what was going to happen 20 years down the line. So the one thing I would tell gardeners indoors and out, just think about the life cycle of your plant and where it's going to end up, not this year, but next year, the years to come. So that would be the tip that I would share.
There you go. Thank you so much. And Michael, what is your biggest garden goof?
I think my biggest garden goof is also my earliest memory, I believe. And when we were at school, we were rooting Tradescantia cuttings and then potting them on into soil, etc. And I remember taking it home and being really proud of this plant. And for some reason, it's a house plant. I was going to plant it in the garden. I don't know why. But then I turned around to plant this, and then I stood on the plant, and I was so sad because I killed the plant, and it was just such a horrible moment. So it's my earliest and my worst memory, my biggest gardening goof. But interesting what Susan just said about hedging. I thought I was being really clever in my new garden a couple of years ago with some Prunus lusitanica, the Portuguese laurel, because I didn't plant whips. I thought I was being really bougie and kind of like, I'll pay for something bigger that is going to be establishing and kind of giving me that instant effect. But actually, when you plant something bigger with a bigger root ball, it took so long to establish that the plants didn't even grow for 2 years. So I wish I'd started with whips and that I wasn't trying to show off in front of my neighbors by planting bigger plants. So that was a lesson as well.
There you go. That's a good lesson. All right. Thank you, Michael. And Shelley, what is this gardening goof and what did you learn from it?
Well, I am resonating with both of these because I do tend to plant small trees or small hedges. I like to start out small in 5-gallon pots or even 1-gallon pots, just like Michael was saying, so that they actually get established. And also because then I don't have to be so strong hauling them around or hauling them out of my car. But it's really hard to actually visualize. I mean, where is my faith? It says it's going to grow to 4 to 5 to 10 feet tall. Do I really believe that or not? I end up so my whole property line is filled with trees that start out as 5-gallon. Now they're like bulging over the fence, and I pay more to trim them than I ever did to buy them. But I'll just say my other biggest gardening goof is do not plant herbs under trees. So because the birds will perch in the branches and they will plop on the herbs, and you don't want to cook with those. That was one of my biggest so, anyway.
That's funny, Shelley. Thank you so much. And Charlotte, what is your biggest gardening goof and what did you learn from it?
Well, so I've been here over 40 years, and early on, my husband at the time decided he wanted to plant grass on a barren limestone hillside. It was a disaster, but it did create my very unique garden, which has paths and garden rooms. But that was not the mistake. The mistake that we made was we did not appreciate what was already growing here. I have a native trees, shrubs, flowers that make this lot very, very unique. And so we should have taken the time to look at what was here, learn to identify that, and not come in and started digging up and cutting things down. So that would be my advice, is take your time to get there. Garden smart, not hard.
There you go. True enough. True enough. Well, I appreciate that because garden goofs happen to everyone, even the experts. Believe me, I think the only difference between new gardeners and experienced gardeners is that we know why our plants die. So it's just one of those things that happens to everyone. So thank you so much, everyone. We're now going to go into a 20-minute breakout room. Everybody will go to a different author, the author of your choice. And after the breakout rooms, we will still have another 2 books to give away. So you don't want to leave because you have to be present to win. And once the authors are finished in the breakouts, everyone will come back to the main room. So let me tell you how we're going to do this. Excellent. Well, welcome back, everyone. We hope you had a great time with each of the authors in the breakout rooms. And so we're going to take this time right now to give away our final 2 authors' books. Susan Betz, Herbal Houseplants, Grow Beautiful Herbs Indoors. And then Michael Perry's book, Hortus Curious. And so that's an exciting book to have too. So Diane, pick the lucky 2 winners.
Okay, so for Michael's book, we have Sheila Goodwin. Congratulations, Sheila. And since we're toward the end, Sheila, please go in and message me, private message me your shipping address, because I want to make sure that you get that address to me before we end the webinar. And then Susan, your book will go to the lucky winner, who is Vicki Hop. So Vicki, please message me your shipping address.
Well, congratulations. Congratulations to all the book winners. And so real quickly though, Diane and I were talking and we're saying we're missing all these great conversations in the breakout rooms. So Susan and Michael and Shelley and Charlotte, let's start off with Susan. Tell us what did you talk about in the break room? There we go.
We had a delightful conversation, and Jenny Rose, being an herbalist too, made the conversation more delightful because she had things to offer from a different perspective than myself, and added to the suggestions. We talked about grow lights, plants that will grow in less shade inside and that needed less sunlight, and how much sunlight herbs need. So it was a great conversation.
Wonderful. And Shelley, what did you talk about in your break room?
We talked about burning bush. We talked about manna. We talked about the indexing that's in the book. And what else? Oh, the apricots and apples. We talked about a biblical diet and how that influences you. And we just talked about the preciousness of God's word and how it really transforms you as you're gardening, as you're reading, as you're digging in.
Oh, that sounds great. All right, thank you. And Charlotte, what did you talk about in your break room?
Well, we were the pollinator people. We were talking about, do you really keep native bees? How do you attract monarch butterflies into your garden? You know, what's the most important thing to do to keep a healthy garden? And how much land do you need to keep bees? So it was a nice wide-ranging series of topics that were all focused on pollinators, supporting pollinators. So plant more flowers.
Excellent, excellent. And Michael, what did you talk about in your break room?
We had some really good questions, some really nice comments. We gave good acknowledgement to the illustrator, which is Aaron Apsley from Florida, who made these really lovely photorealistic illustrations that really make the book as well. We talked about the journey of putting the book together, the shows that I'd given in the past, the Weird and Wacky Plant shows, and how that became the book that's here today, kind of how I followed the guidance of the publishers as well, and kind of how they influenced what the book became. We talked about my trip in Holland. We talked about my garden at home. Yeah, it was really, really cool. Really cool.
Oh, excellent. That sounds like fun. Well, we really congratulations to all the book winners, and thank you to the authors. And I'm going to turn it over to Maria Zampini, and she is the president of GardenComm. And Maria, take it away.
Thank you. Wow. I mean, I don't know about you guys, but I'm inspired. I've got my books. I'm ready to go. I don't have Charlotte's. I did get Charlotte's book, but I gave it to the local beekeeper. So I'm hoping honey will be coming my way soon. Anyway, yeah, I'm ready for the gardening season, even though it's really winding down now. But anyway, thank you to our authors, Michael, Charlotte, Shelley, Susan, and our podcaster host, Teresa. We really appreciate you sharing your gardening passion with us. And as you can see, the members of GardenComm and NGB come from many different backgrounds and locations. And to learn more about Garden Communicators International, go to gardencom.org. So thank you. And I think I'm turning maybe over to Diane next, or no, you've got something.
Well, I'm going to turn it over to Diane, but I want everyone to wait because after Diane, I'm going to tell you how to save the chat and save the links and give you just a little bit more information, and then you're free to go. So Diane, go ahead.
I'm not sure what else I can say. This was a wonderful event. I will reiterate what Maria said about thanking our authors, thanking all the attendees who came on. Somebody had said, oh, I love this. Is there going to be another one? Yes, there will be. Teresa will tell us about that event. But yes, thank you, everybody. And continue to come to the NGB website. I put the book link in there. So a lot of the books are available for sale directly from that page. And with that, I'll toss it back to you, Teresa.
Thank you so much, Diane. Okay, so here's how you save the chat and you save the links. At the bottom of the chat window, click the ellipsis. Those are the 3 dots. Then click Save Chat. This will save your chat to your local recording location. And the default is going to be your documents folder /Zoom/folder with the meeting name, date, and time. And then all the previous book parties, if you've missed the parties we've had in the past, all the great fun, you can find them all on NGB, National Garden Bureau's YouTube channel. And Diane is going to post that link in the chat. Now, the next one, I can't wait for the next one. It's going to be great. It's going to be in the spring 2024. It's going to be a book party with 4 new authors. And so you want to save the date, March 7th, 2024. We'll see you then. Thank you so much for coming from National Garden Bureau and Garden Communicators International. Good night.